So we will continue with the female fertility. In the last class we have learned what are the causes of female infertility and how we have to go for investigations. So we have done this history part, physical examination, and the hormonal profile, and then assessment of ovulation by different techniques like basal body temperature, cervical mucus study, vaginal cytology, hormone estimation, luteal phase progesterone level, serum LH level or urinary LH kit, serum estradiol level, endometrial biopsy and ultrasonography. By these methods you can assess whether ovulation has been occurred or not. So we will continue with the female infertility. The next major important part is the ovarian reserve. It represents the resting follicle pool from which follicles will be recruited for maturation throughout the life. So resting follicular pool can be known as ovarian reserve. Its level decline with advancing female age, and clinical manifestation of all these changes is rapid decline fertility rate as well as sharp increase in aneuploidy and miscarriage. So with advancing age the ovarian reserve decreases as well as anomalies will be increased with the low ovarian reserve. This helps in prediction of women who may respond or over respond to ovarian stimulation if you will give. So that's why it is important to know about the ovarian reserve. Different markers are available to assess about the ovarian reserve. It can be baseline hormonal level of FSH, inhibin B, estradiol and AMH. So by hormonal profile you can assess the ovarian reserve. Another parameters, it can be by ultrasound, AFC count, that is antral follicular count, ovarian volume, ovarian stromal blood flow level. Some different tests are available. It is clomiphene citrate challenge test, it is CCCT, exogenous FSH, ovarian reserve test, effort, GnRH agonist stimulation test, CAST. So different markers for ovarian reserves are available. If you will find on day 3 FSH level is more than 15 international unit per liter and your estradiol level E2 is more than 80 picogram per ml, inhibin level is less than 45 picogram per ml, MH is less than 0.7 nanogram per ml, AFC antral follicular count is less than 4 and ovarian volume is less than 3 cubic meter. So this represents the poor ovarian reserve and these values are associated with poor aspirated oocyte and large number of cancelled cycle if you perform the IVF in these cases. AMH is the best biomarker for the ovarian reserve, and here this reflects the size of primordial follicular pool. AMH can be measured anytime during menstrual period, while the hormonal profile we have done it on the day 3 FSH, day 3 E2, day 3 inhibin, but AMH can be done anytime during menstrual period. And best biomarker, its normal level is between the 1 to 3.5 nanogram per ml. This suggests the good response to stimulation if you will do the ovulation induction. If you will have AMH level less than 1 nanogram per ml, this predicts baseline ovarian reserve with a likelihood of limited eggs. That means it is having low ovarian reserve. If AMH is more than 3.5, this predicts vigorous response to ovarian stimulation. If you do the ovulation induction in these cases, then you will find the over response. and caution should be exercised in order to avoid ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome. And this type of picture you can see in the PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. We have talked about different dynamic tests. It is clomiphene citrate challenge test. Here we used to give 100 milligram of clomiphene citrate from day 5 to day 9 of the cycle, and FSH is measured on day 3 and day 10th, and abnormally high value, which is around cutoff is 10 to 26 milli international unit, indicates the diminished reserve. So if you have done the ovulation induction with the clomiphene citrate, so because it is having anti-estrogenic effect, because of this anti-estrogenic effect, there is no negative feedback of estrogen to the hypothalamus and pituitary, so it will raise the FSH value. But abnormally high value indicates the diminished ovarian reserve, because clomiphene citrate have to work more, so it will cause more FSH have to release to induce folliculogenesis. So if you will find FSH level more very high value, this indicates the diminished ovarian reserve. Other test, exogenous FSH ovarian reserve test. Here you have to take day 3 inhibin level and then administer 300 international unit FSH, and then again after 24 hours you have to go for this level, inhibin level. This effort value is post inhibin B minus pre inhibin B. If this value is less than 78.6, that means your patient is poor responder. If it is between 78.6 to 110.4, then it is borderline responder, and if it is more than 110.4, this is good responder. Another test, GnRH agonist stimulation test, GAST. GnRH agonist stimulation test. Here a gonadotropin releasing hormone, that is usually it is released from hypothalamus. Here when a gonadotropin releasing hormone agonist initiate, if we give in the form exogenous or from outside, it will initially cause increase, it will act on the pituitary definitely, and it will elevate the or induce the pituitary to secrete more FSH, LH and E2. And then because this exogenous GnRH occupy all the receptors in the pituitary, then profoundly suppress both FSH and LH, because hypothalamic GnRH will or could not act on the pituitary, because it is already occupied, the receptors are already occupied by GnRH agonist. So by the exogenous GnRH agonist, there will be flare up effect. Initially there is increase in the FSH, LH and E2, then finally it caused the profound suppression of pituitary and caused the decrease in level of the FSH and LH both. So this is known as flare effect. Here we used to give the administration of 100 microgram baserlin. Different type of agonists are available. It is baserlin, neferlin, goserlin, luprolin. So if you administer 100 microgram of baserlin every 4 hours for total dose of 1200 microgram, or every 6 hours for total dose of 800 microgram, and serum FSH and estradiol to be measured before and after 24 hours of treatment. Change in the estradiol level less than 180 picogram per ml or FSH 9.5 international predicts poor oocyte response. So this is the another dynamic test to assess the ovarian reserve. Now after ovarian factor, some tubal factors test for tubal factor or for patency or functional integrity of tubes. So different tests are available. It's most older one is the insufflation test. It is dilatation and insufflation test. HSG, hysterosalpingography, laparoscopy and chromoperturbation, sonohysterosalpingography, phalloscopy and salpingoscopies. Principles when we talk, so insufflation test, HSG, sonohysterosalpingography, chromoperturbation, principles are same. Principle is because cervical canal is in continuity with the peritoneal cavity through the tubes. So whatever the substance we will insert from cervical canal, it will come out from the peritoneal cavity. This is the principle of this test. So when to do this test? So it is to be done usually of day 7 or day 9 of the cycle, or that is 2 days after the stoppage of menstrual blood. If we will thinking it is day 5 when the stoppage of blood, menstrual blood occur, so it is around 7th day. So it should be done in post menstrual period around day 7 to day 9. Limitation, it should not be done in presence of pelvic infection because it will flare up the infection. So in preferably in the TB it should be avoided. So oldest one is insufflation or Rubin's test, also known as Rubin's test because it is discovered by Rubens. Here what we use, substance we use here is the entry of air or CO2. So CO2 is pushed from the vaginal part and the CO2 is come out from the peritoneal cavity under the pressure and gives the evidence of tubal patency. And this patency is confirmed by if we will increase the pressure from vaginal end, there is a fall in the pressure beyond 120 mm of, because it is escaping out from the fimbrial end. So there is a fall in pressure when fall reached beyond 120 mm of mercury, or you may even auscultate the hissing sound from the iliac fossa, or so you may find the patient may having the shoulder pain. So this is the method, or this was the principle for Rubin's test. But some drawbacks were there. It gives false negative finding due to cornual spasm, and it cannot identify the side where if there is a blockage in one side, it cannot, by this test you could not find the side of abnormality. It is not commonly done nowadays, that's why. HSG, here principle is same. Instead of CO2 or air, we use dye. Here dye is used and it is inserted or instilled from cervical end. But here advantage is that it can detect the side or site of block in the tube. And one more drawback which was there in the insufflation test, you can assess the abnormality in the uterus. So it is more better. It can assess the side and site of blockage, and it can assess the abnormality in the uterus also. So it can detect the anomaly, congenital abnormality, acquired abnormality like synecdoche or fibroid, but there is a risk of radiation. So you can see this is the picture of normal HSG. Here by this tube we used to put the dye, and this is the uterus which is normal looking. The shape is absolutely normal, and here you can see it is tube is patent, that's why dye is coming out of this tube. So tube is absolutely patent. So this is the picture of normal HSG. Sonohysterosalpingography. Here instead of this dye, we used to push the normal saline. within the uterine cavity with pediatric Foley's catheter. Ultrasound is used to see the pathway of the normal line. Ultrasound can follow the fluid through the tubes up to the peritoneal cavity. You can see the bubbles traveling from the uterus to the tube to the peritoneal cavity. So this is non-invasive test and there is a no radiation exposure benefit is this, and this can detect the abnormalities like the HSG. It can detect the uterine abnormalities and even the side of the tubes, the abnormal side of the tubes. So you can use the sonohysterosalpingography also. Another method is the laparoscopy and the chromopertubation. Here by laparoscope, if you are in the peritoneal cavity, this is the picture of the uterus and this is the posterior view. So you can see by posterior view only you can see the this ovary. So this is the uterus, this is the pouch of Douglas, this is the tubes and this is the round ligament anteriorly. So laparoscopy and chromopertubation. By chromopertubation you have to put the dye from vaginal end, that is methylene blue dye, and we can by laparoscope you can see the dye is coming out of the tube fimbrial end. See, this is the bluish part, this is the methylene blue. So by direct method, this is direct method and definitely definitive method to assess for the tubal patency. Phalloscopy, it is to study the entire length of tube lumen. Here we used to, you can assess the lumen can be also seen by this phalloscopy with the help of that is fiber optic device, and it is usually performed through the uterine cavity using hysteroscope. During hysteroscopy you can use the flexible fiber optic device and you can see the entire length of tube lumen. This helps in direct visualization of tubal ostia, mucosal pattern, intratubal polyps or debris. So phalloscopy is by flexible fiber optic device. During hysteroscopy you can see different abnormalities of the tube. Salpingoscopy, here rigid endoscope through the fimbrial end. So it is used along with laparoscopy. Phalloscopy is used along with hysteroscope, while salpingoscope is used along with laparoscope. So rigid endoscope through fimbrial end of the tube, you can study about the tubal lumen. So salpingoscopy. So we have seen the different method to investigate for the tubal patency. Insufflation test is to HSG, sonohysterosalpingography, laparoscopy and chromopertubation, phalloscopy and salpingoscopy. Now for uterine factor you can assess it by the ultrasonography, HSG by the hysterosalpingography, hysteroscopy and laparoscopy for uterine factor of subfertility. Different cervical function tests are available. If you are thinking about the if there is an infection, you can go for the culture for suspected pathogen. If you are thinking there is a problem in the postcoital test, or there is a problem anti-sperm antibodies are present, you can go for postcoital test. It is also known as Sims-Hanna test. It is usually scheduled around 1 to 2 days before ovulation. 48 hours of male abstinence before test is required. Husband should not use any lubrication, and evaluate 8 to 12 hours after the coitus. So after the male should be for in the abstinence for 48 hours, and after the 8 to 12 hours of coitus you have to do this test. You have to collect the mucus from the cervix after 8 to 12 hours of the coitus through the syringe, and it should be spread over the slide and see for the sperm. If it is less than 10 motile sperm per HPF, you should go for semen analysis. Count may be less, but if it is normal, then ASA in the cervical mucus cause the shaky or rotatory movement or total immobility. So by collecting this mucus, you can also look for this movement. No longer routine test since subjective interpretation, so poor correlation with pregnancy rates. And for detecting anti-sperm antibodies, because both men and women have capability to mount humoral response to sperm, and it interfere with the capacitation, acrosomal reaction, sperm egg fusion, cleavage of early embryo contribute to subfertility rather than absolute infertility. Different tests are available. These are sperm agglutination test, complement dependent test, immunobead test. By these tests you can detect the anti-sperm antibodies, but clinical utility is limited. After investigation your patient for cervical factor, ovarian factor, uterine factor, male factor, tubal factor, you should go for the treatment, and treatment should be by the organ unit. That means I will tell you in the next slide. Couple instruction. Definitely counseling is most important part for the infertility treatment. You should give the psychological support. Optimistic discussion should be worth rewarding. Fault should be treated simultaneously. That means not one after other. Husband and wife should be treated by simultaneous. Body weight, overweight and underweight of should be adequately dealt. Smoking and alcohol or any type of addiction should be avoided. If you detect any coital problem, it should be evaluated by intelligence interrogation. Tell them for timed intercourse, that is, you should tell them about the fertile period. On investigation, if you had detected the ovulatory disorder, then some different measures are available. You should give emotional support by psychotherapy, and in case of PCOS, you should go ask them for weight reduction. For ovulatory disorder, finally you have to go for ovulation induction by the drugs. So different goals for ovulation induction. It should be started with simplest and least invasive method. Maximize the rate of singleton pregnancy, because this is the drawback of ovulation induction is the multiple pregnancy. Minimize the risk of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, which is also the risk of ovulation induction. Different drugs are available for ovulation induction. It is clomiphene citrate, which is most commonly used. Letrozole, HMG, which is the combination of FSH and LH. FSH alone in the purified urinary form, highly purified urinary form, recombinant FSH and HCG you can use. It can be in the recombinant HCG or different GnRH analogs. So different drugs are available for ovulation induction. If you have find for the ovulation induction, if you have find some different abnormalities, like if you have find hyperinsulinemia, which is usually seen in the PCOS cases, you should start with the metformin or insulin sensitizer. And if you have find androgen excess, start dexamethasone. If prolactin level is raised, start caberlin or bromocriptine. If there is a hypothyroidism, start with thyroid hormone thyroxine. If there is a diabetes, then correct it. So different drugs most commonly used is the clomiphene citrate, which having 70% induction rate, 40% pregnancy rate. It should have one important criteria: there should be functional hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis. That means your HPO axis should be patent or it should be functional. Here we start clomiphene from day 2 or day 3 for 5 days with the dose of 50 to maximum 250 mg once daily. It acts through anti-estrogenic effect. Because of anti-estrogenic effect, there is a no negative feedback to the hypothalamus, because estrogen having a negative feedback effect on the hypothalamus as well as in pituitary and prevent the release of FSH and LH. So because of the anti-estrogenic effect, there is a no negative feedback to FSH and LH. So FSH and LH will increase and it will induce the folliculogenesis. So this is the mechanism of action of this clomiphene citrate. You can monitor this cycle with the FSH, LH, estradiol or E2 progesterone and by the follicular study by USG. If no pregnancy in the 6th month, refer for advanced therapies. So your patient should be normogonadotropic, normoprolactinemic, who are having normal cycle with absent or infrequent ovulation. PCOS, definitely in these cases you can use it. You can use in hypothalamic cases or central cases also in some of the hypothalamic cases where it is because amenorrhea is because of stress or pills use only. With the ovulation induction, you have to use some different drugs also. After the ovulation induction, when you have done the folliculogenesis, you have to give drugs for ovulation. After folliculogenesis, you have to rupture the follicle so that it can release the oocyte. So some ovulation triggers are available, which is you can use the HCG injection 5,000 to 10,000 international unit when of the following conditions are met. When follicle size after ovulation induction become 18 to 20 mm, when the number of follicle more than 16 mm is not more than 4, or follicle more than 12 mm not more than 8 in number, and if serum E2 is not more than 15 to 2000 picogram per ml, and different ovulatory triggers. Apart from HCG injection, you can use recombinant HCG, recombinant LH or GnRH analog like injection leupride 1 mg. So after the ovulation induction, when you have done the when your patient started folliculogenesis and your follicle is reaching to this size, you can give injection HCG for ovulation. So for ovulation, or you have to give injection HCG, and you apart from HCG you can use these drugs, GnRH analog or recombinant LH also. Some other adjuvant therapy may be required to give. If C was the case of PCOS with hyperandrogenemia, you can use the glucocorticoid like prednisolone 5 mg per day or dexamethasone 0.5 to 2 mg per day can be used in continuous or follicular phase treatment. OCP, again in case of hyperandrogenemia, OCP can be given prior to the clomiphene citrate therapy. This improves the ovulation and pregnancy rate by decreasing hyperandrogenemia. If there is a hypothyroidism, you should treat it. If there was prolactin level is high, you should start with the cabergoline or bromocriptine. This will increase the ovarian responsiveness to clomiphene. if your patient was obese PCOS, where chances of insulin tolerance or impaired glucose tolerance, insulin resistance are more, you can start with metformin also. So along with ovulation induction drugs, you may require to give ovulation trigger by HCG or LH or GnRH analog. You may require, in cases of PCOS or hyperandrogenemia, you may require to give glucocorticoid like prednisolone and dexamethasone, OCP, or thyroid correction of thyroid, prolactin, or insulin resistance. Another ovulation induction drug is letrozole. Some patients such as PCOS do not respond well to clomiphene, so letrozole in these cases are the choice. These are aromatase inhibitor. So this in case of clomiphene I forgot to tell about, because it is anti-estrogenic. So there is an anti-estrogenic effect on hypothalamus as well as pituitary. Along with this, there is an anti-estrogenic effect on cervical mucus also. So if there is an anti-estrogenic effect on cervical mucus, so it will thicken the cervical mucus, so it doesn't favor the sperm penetration, so it is detrimental for sperm penetration. So it is negative effect of this clomiphene citrus. Another negative effect, because it having also having anti-estrogenic effect on endometrium. So your layers, triple layers which are forming, or receptivity which should have during implantation, it will not have. So negative effect on endometrium as well as the cervical mucus because of anti-estrogenic effect on cervix as well as in endometrium. While in case of letrozole, because it inhibits the enzyme aromatase in the granulosa cells of ovarian follicle, again it suppresses the hypothalamic and this pituitary level. So there is an effect on this, causes the increase in the FSH and LH level, but there is a no peripheral anti-estrogenic effect on endometrium and cervical mucus. So it is having no negative effect on these level. So it is better in this way. So it can be used as a first line therapy alternative to clomiphene, or in the clomiphene resistant woman. Risk of multiple pregnancy and anomalies are also low. Dose is 2.5 to 5 mg from day 2 or day 3 of cycle for next 5 days. So next drug which can be used for ovulation induction is the gonadotropins. Gonadotropins are FSH and LH. FSH and LH are gonadotropins. It can be derived from two sources, biological or manufactured. FSH can be used commonly for this ovulation induction, but LH could not be used in alone. So if FSH and LH can be used in combination as HMG. What are the indications to use these gonadotropins? If your patient, in case of clomiphene, your patient should be normogonadotropic, your HPOXX should be maintained. In this you can use. If your patient is hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, that is WHO type 1, if C was a case with normogonadism with failed clomiphene cycle, if there is an unexplained infertility, there is a subfertility but elder patient, so you can use the gonadotropins. Different preparations are available. These are HMG, purified urinary FSH Metrodin, recombinant FSH Gonal F, recombinant LH Lutropin, recombinant FSH and recombinant LH Pargovaris HCG and recombinant HCG. These are different preparations available as a gonadotropin. Gonadotropin regimen may be step up or step down. Regimens may be in the form of step up or step down. That means if their dose is in the increasing manner, that means in the step up, and if we are using in the decreasing manner, the dose is in the decreasing manner, then it is known as a step down, depending upon the response of woman. Whatever you are using step or step down, it will be according to response of woman to exogenous gonadotropin. Serum estradiol level 500 to 1500 picogram per ml and maximum follicular diameter 18 to 20 mm of mercury and ET of endometrial thickness, which should be in the, that is, tri-layer or triple layer, it should be around more than 9 mm, is taken as a optimum for ovulation. So estradiol level between 500 to 1500, follicle diameter between 18 to 20 mm and endometrial thickness should be more than 9 mm is taken as a optimum. After induction with gonadotropin or after induction with clomiphene citrate or after induction with letrozole, you can use this trigger, ovulation trigger, with HCG of 5000 to 10,000 international unit of HCG is administered IM to induce the ovulation. So different protocols we have seen. So low dose step up protocol, step down protocol, where chances of this syndrome are made, ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome, and sequential protocol combined as an initial step up followed by step down regimen. Chances of OHS is also there here also. So what is the step up protocol? Just go through it, not for you in your stage in the MBBS. So this is low dose step up, but by this you can learn what is a step up and step down protocols. Here we will start with the 75 international unit of FSH from day 3 of the cycle, continue for the 7th day. If it is more than 10 mm, follicular size become more than 10 mm, then continue the same dose till it become 18 mm, then give HCG injection. If your follicle size still become 10 mm, maintain same dose for next 7 days. Again, if it is less than 10 mm, then if become more than 10 mm, then follow this regime, and if still it is less than 10 mm, then increase by 37.5 international unit, continue for next 7 days. Again, if it is follicle size is less than 10 mm, again increase the dose by 37.5 with maximum dose is 225 international unit, and if still follicle size is less than 10, then cancel the cycle. So this is the chronic low dose step up protocol. So you can see how we are stepping up the FSH level. Here this is the step down protocol. We will start from the higher dose 150 to 250 international unit from day 3 of the cycle for next 5 days. Then ultrasonography done every 2 to 3 days after 7th day. If size become more than 9 mm, if size become more than 9 less than more than 9 mm, then decrease the dose by here we are decreasing by 37.5 international unit every 3 day, and then maintain 75 international unit day until it become the size of 18 mm or till the ovulation. Here if it's still less 9 mm, then you can increase the dose. More than 9, then follow this. If less than 9, then cancel cycle. So this is the step down protocol. In case of PCOS patient, injection HMG, which is the combination of FSH and LH, is more effective. In case of PCOS, where AMH is high, we have learned there will be chances of hyperstimulation will be more. So over responder, chances of ovarian hyperstimulation syndrome is more. So low dose step up protocol should be used. With use of gonadotropin, chances of spontaneous abortion, multiple pregnancy and OHSS are more. So word about the OHSS. It is potentially life-threatening complications of ovulation induction. Its most severe form include massive ovarian enlargement, multiple cysts with hemoconcentration. There will be edema everywhere. Third space accumulation of fluid. This may lead to complicated by renal failure, because of hemoconcentration. So, there will be volume will be less in the intravascular level. So there is a renal failure, hypovolemic site, thromboembolic episode, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and even death. So this is the one of the major complication of this ovulation induction drug. With the ovulation induction, we have learned about the ovulation trigger and some hormonal treatment, like a prolactin level or thyroid level or the insulin resistance you have to correct. But sometime it may require the adjuvant therapy. Particularly in case of if your induction has been done with the gonadotropins. So GnRH agonist, which is GnRH is related by hypothalamus. So GnRH agonist like buserelin, goserelin, naferlin or antagonist cetrorelix are commonly used for women with ovulatory infertility undergoing controlled ovarian hyperstimulation with gonadotropins in the setting of IVF. So where we have done the ovulation induction, controlled ovarian hyperstimulation known as ovulation induction is also in case of IVF also known as controlled ovarian hyperstimulation, where induction has been done with gonadotropins. You may require or you may have to use this agonist or antagonist. The goal to use this agonist or GnRH agonist and antagonist is to suppress the pituitary gonadotropins to optimize the control of cycle and prevent a surge of endogenous LH prior to full maturation of cohort of ovarian follicles. So by using this GnRH agonist or antagonist, you can suppress by agonist you can suppress the pituitary, or by antagonist with the flare up effect, but with the antagonist you can directly suppress the pituitary and you can suppress the natural endogenous LH surge to prevent the ovulation beforehand or prior to the full maturation of ovarian follicle. GnRH agonist, that is buserelin, naferlin is given subcutaneously. Naferlin is given by intranasal route, either maintaining a short or long protocol. I will tell you later what is short and long protocol. Step up and step down is for gonadotropin, that is FSH and LH. Here's long and short protocol is different. It is for GnRH agonist. GnRH agonist is used for down regulation or to suppress the pituitary gland by desensitization of pituitary GnRH receptor. GnRH agonist initially produce stimulation of gonadotropin secretion known as flare effect, and generally this flare effect lasts for 2 to 3 weeks. Adequate pituitary suppression is achieved when how can you assess whether pituitary suppression has been achieved or not? So you can achieve it, or you can identify it by the estradiol level where it is less than 10 picogram per ml and FSH level less than 10 milli international unit per ml. GnRH antagonist can block pituitary GnRH receptor completely without any flare effect. Citrorelix is currently being tried to prevent premature LH surge. So to taken up the control of the cycle to yourself, you have to use the GnRH agonist and antagonist to suppress the natural cycle over the pituitary and hypothalamus. After the ovulation defect, ovulation induction, if you have find on the investigation, if you find the luteal phase defect, then luteal phase defect is the because of the lack of progesterone. So you have to give progesterone either in the form of suppository, or even you can use the HCG also. In unresponsive cases, clomiphene citrate may be tried, which may improve the folliculogenesis and normal corpus luteum formation with adequate production of progesterone. In refractory cases, IVF may be tried. If this was the case of LUF, luteinized unruptured, where the ovulation could not be occurred. In luteinized unruptured follicle, ovulation could not be occurred. So ovulation trigger you can give, it may be in the form of HCG or in the or it may be in the leuprolide, that is GnRH agonist also. It may be because of it may be because of hyperprolactinemia, you can give bromocriptine or cabergoline. Some different surgical method for ovarian problems. In case of resistant PCOS, if multiple cysts are there, so LOD, that is laparoscopic ovarian drilling or laser vaporization, you can do. Here multiple 4 to 6 sites puncture is done. This reduces the systemic as well as intra-ovarian androgen level and induce the spontaneous ovulation. Wedge resection of ovary is not done today. If there is you will find the prolactinoma, you can go for surgical removal, and surgical removal of virilization other functioning ovarian or adrenal tumor you can do. After this, I think it's a very huge topic. So for we are doing the treatment according to organ unit. We have solved the ovulatory problem by this ovulation induction drug, different types, clomiphene citrate along with triggers and adjuvants, letrozole, gonadotropins. In case of gonadotropin, you can use step up or step down along with GnRH analogs. Luteal phase defect can be treated by progesterone, and LUF can be treated with this ovulation induction drugs. In case of resistant PCOS, you can perform the LODs. So now coming to the tubal factor. So it can be corrected only by surgery if you find your tube is not patent. If it is peritubal surgery, it can be in the form of salpingo ovariolysis by laparotomy or laparoscopy. Proximal tube block, you can do it by hysteroscopy, or you can do balloon tuboplasty. Distal tube block, you can do fibroplasty or fibrolysis, or neosalpingostomy you can make. Mid tubal block, reversal of tubal ligation, recanalization you can do. Injective procedure, it may require to improve the result of tubal surgery, include the prophylactic antibiotic To prevent to prevent the adhesion, some drugs or some hydrotubations are to be used. So different tuboplasty operations: salpingo-variolysis, separation and division of adhesions; fimbrioplasty, separation of fimbrial adhesions and opening of the ostium; salpingostomy, create new opening or completely occluded tube. It is called terminal or cuff at the abdominal ostium. Tubal anastomosis, when the segment of deceased tube is resected following tubectomies. End-to-end anastomosis is done. Tubocorneal anastomosis, where the corneal block, the remaining healthy tube is anastomosed to the patent interstitial part of the tube. So these are the different tuboplasty operations. For the cervical factor, so tubal problems can be dealt only with the surgery. Cervical factor, if you find cervical factor when cannot be treated, is overcome by different artificial reproductive techniques like IUI, IVF and this gift. Immunological factor, if you find, you can use the dexamethasone 0.5 mg at bedtime in the follicular phase, or as there is no distinct benefit such treatment of anti-SPA patient, COH, IUI, IVF, ICSI can be recommended. If you find uterovaginal factor, if you find the fibroid, go for myomectomy. If you congenitally malformed uterus, then go for metroplasty or different unification operations. If you find the Asselman syndrome, you can go for hysteroscopic adheolysis with insertion of IUCD. If there is a septum or in the vagina or small vaginal introitus, you should go for enlargement of vaginal introitus by Fenton's operation. If there is a endometrial polyp, go for hysteroscopic polypectomy. Now coming to the artificial insemination. So two methods are there. One is IUI, intrauterine insemination. Second is the fallopian tube sperm perfusion. Here it is the procedure by which concentrated or motile sperms are placed directly into the uterine cavity. By this you can see this is the Sims speculum, and by this tube we are injecting the sperm, which is concentrated or processed form. Goal is to maximize the chances of fertilization and increase number of eggs and position sperm close to the eggs. What are the different indications of IUI? If there is an impossibility of vaginal ejaculation, if there is an impotence, severe hypospadias, retrograde ejaculation or cryopreservation of sperm, in case of cancer treatment, you can go for the IUI. If there is a abnormal male factor, oligospermia, asthenospermia and teratozoospermia, so by the processing the semen, you can go through it. Unexplained infertility, cervical factor, if there is an immunological factor in the cervix, you have to bypass the cervix, then you can go for this. Mild to moderate endometriosis and chronic anovulatory cycle, you first go for IUI. IUI may be either AIH from the husband or from the donor. Common method to extract sperm from seminal plasma is washing, which is oldest method. It is not done nowadays. Swim up method, which is better than washing method, and most better method or best method is density gradient centrifugation, which require most highly motile as well as morphologically normal sperms. So washing, swim up and density gradient centrifugations. Generally 4 to 6 cycle of IUI with the superovulation is advised. IUI along with superovulation gives highest result, but it can be done in natural cycle without induction of ovulation. Timing. Luteinizing hormone surge can be detected in serum 36 before ovulation, in urine 24 hours before ovulation. Oocyte can be fertilized up to 24 hours after ovulation. Sperm is most capable of fertilization up to 48 hours after entering the female genital tract. So timing of IUI is based on these relationship. So by detecting the LH surge and by the knowledge, the oocyte is remaining only for, it is not 24, oocyte remaining in the body only for 12 hours, and sperm can live in the body, in the female body for 2 to 3 days. By these knowledge you can go for this, timing can be decided. So timing can be controversial. Artificial therapeutic insemination by donor is indicated in case of untreatable agiospermia or asthenozoospermia, genetic diseases, or Rh negative donor insemination for women with Rh sensitization. So in these cases you can go for the IUI with donor. Now coming to the assisted ART, assisted reproductive techniques. So different nomenclatures are there: IVFET, in vitro fertilization and embryo transfer; gamete intrafallopian transfer gift; zygote intrafallopian transfer gift; peritoneal oocyte and sperm transfer post; tubal embryo transfer zone TET; subjonal insemination SUJI; intracytoplasmic sperm injection ICSI; assisted hatching AH; in vitro maturation of oocyte IVM; pre-implantation genetic diagnosis PGD; cryopreservation of embryo, oocyte, ovarian tissue and sperms; and gestational surrogacy. These are different nomenclatures for ART. What are the indications? So IVF as a first line, you can go for IVF in case of severe tubal pathology or non-repairable tubal pathology, or in case of if there is a donor oocytes are required, if the genetic surrogacy is required, if there is a possibility of genetically transmitted disease, if fertility preservation in cases of cancer patient, and in case of the severe male factor or agiospermia. IVF followed failed cycle of IUI, you can go usually up to 6 cycle of IUI with control ovarian is recommended, but if it is failed you can directly go for the IVF cycle. What are the principal steps of ART? Because this is last class, so that's why I am going through it. So down regulation using GnRH agonist. First step, down regulation of using GnRH to suppress the natural cycle or to suppress the pituitary. Second is the control. Then after that the ovulation induction, that is known as controlled ovarian hyperstimulation. Then monitoring of follicular growth, and after growth of the follicle, ovulation is skipped. Here we go for oocyte retrieval, and after this oocyte retrieval, fertilization is done in vitro outside with the semen or sperm. Then after fertilization, when it is changed into the gamete or embryo form, then transferred to the female patient, and luteal support is given with the progesterone. So GnRH analog for down regulation to suppress the pituitary, currently tried along with gonadotropin stimulation, citrullalix or ganone, no flare-up effect, we have already read it. Different protocol for agonist, where you can see the flare effect, you can use the long follicular down regulation, where the this suppression can be start from the cycle before or prior to the ovulation induction. That means previous cycle, in previous cycle where induction has been not occurred. So this GnRH agonist is started in prior cycle of the ovulation induction. So in the follicular phase, when it is started in the follicle, one cycle before the ovulation induction. So here we have to start the GnRH agonist in the follicular cycle, and this is known as long follicular down regulation, because it flare up effect remain for 2 to 3 weeks, and so it is started in beforehand. And next is the long luteal down regulation, where it is started in prior cycle in the luteal phase, and short flare protocol where in the same cycle. Here gonadotropin and GnRH agonist is given in the same cycle, and it can work over the stimulatory effect of GnRH agonist. But here the dose of gonadotropin have to be adjusted. So for next, so this is the down regulation first step. Second is the SUH, that is ovulation induction with different clomiphene citrate, different for IVF different regimes are there. After this down regulation, which we have learned how it is detected, ovulation induction has been started, that is controlled, because we have already controlled the cycle, so that's why it is known as controlled ovarian hyperstimulation. Here we used to stimulate either with clomiphene CC or HMG, clomiphene with the FSH, or clomiphene with recombinant FSH, HMG, FSH, or GnRH analog, or HMG. SCG is administered in each regimen are seen when it is size is more than 10 mm on TVS. Then monitoring started on day 8th of the cycle, and when size is reaches about 18 mm and E2 level more than 250 picogram per follicle, 5000 to 10,000 of SCG is to be given intramuscularly. Then after 36 of SCG injection, so third step is monitoring. After this injection, you have to collect the you have to go for oocyte retrieval with the help of ultrasound by the vaginal transducer. Here by the vaginal end, vaginal needle is inserted in the ovary and aspiration is done, and with the fluid oocyte coming out, and this oocyte is maintained in culture for next 4 to 6 hours. After this collection, sperm is used for insemination in vitro is prepared. Here sperm is collected immediately, and it is prepared either by density gradient centrifugation or swim up method, and around 50,000 to 1 lakh capacitated sperm is placed in the culture media containing oocyte within 4 to 6 hours of retrieval, and the sign of fertilization can be seen when it is examined after 6 to 18 hours of the insemination. After fertilization, this when it is coming to 6 to 8 blastomere stage, it is placed in the uterine cavity close to the fundus about 3 days after the fertilization. Not more than 3 embryos are transferred per cycle to minimize the multiple pregnancy. And last step is the luteal phase support. Here you have to support the this luteal phase with the progesterone, either progesterone or HCG. Progesterone may be in the form oral, or maybe in the vaginal suppository, or in the IM injections. And end result of IVF is the in most of the cases you can see the twin pregnancy. Thank you.